Welcome to my channel. Have you ever wondered how a young girl from a small town in Europe became one of the most loved and respected women in the entire world? How did she leave everything behind to serve the poorest of the poor in India? And what secrets lie in the untold journey of Mother Teresa? Secrets that most people don't even know. Today, we are going to uncover the hidden story, the struggles, and the powerful moments of a woman who changed the world, not with money or power, but with love, care, and deep faith. So stay with me, because every chapter of this story will surprise you and inspire you. Let's begin this beautiful journey together. Chapter 1. The Girl Named Agnes. Before she became Mother Teresa, she was just a little girl named Agnes. Agnes Gongsha Bojakshiu was born on August 26, 1910, in a city called Skopje, which is in today's North Macedonia, but at that time it was part of the Ottoman Empire. She was the youngest of 3 children in a loving and religious Albanian family. Her father, Nikola, was a businessman and active in politics. He was strong and smart, and he cared deeply about his country and his people. Her mother, Drena, was kind, gentle, and very religious. She always helped the poor in their neighborhood. Every Sunday, she would cook extra food and invite the poor people from the street into their home. Agnes watched this closely. She didn't forget it. But when Agnes was just 8 years old, something very sad happened. Her father died suddenly. Some people believed it was poison. Others believed it was illness. No one really knew. But this moment changed everything for little Agnes. Her family became poor. Her mother had to take care of the family alone. And young Agnes? She became more quiet, more serious, and more focused on her faith. Even as a child, she was different. While other kids played, Agnes would often go to church, pray, and sing. She loved listening to stories about missionaries, men and women who traveled far away to help people in need. These stories excited her heart. She started to feel something special inside, a strong desire to help others. One day when she was about 12 years old, she told her mother something shocking. She said, "I want to be a missionary. I want to leave home and serve the poor." Her mother looked at her, surprised, but she didn't stop her. Instead, she said, "Put your hand in his hand and walk all the way with him." She meant trust God and go forward bravely. Years passed, but that calling inside Agnes only grew stronger. She studied hard, played the mandolin, and even joined a church choir. But her dream was not music or school. Her dream was to serve. When she turned 18, she made the most difficult decision of her life. She decided to leave her family, her home, and her country forever, to join a group of nuns called the Sisters of Loreto in Ireland. She had never been there before. She didn't speak English. She had no idea what her future would look like. The night before she left, her mother hugged her tightly and said, "Only God knows how happy I am to give you to Him." This was the last time Agnes ever saw her mother and sister in person. She left by train. The train took her far from home. Then she took a boat to Ireland. It was cold, rainy, and very different from Macedonia. But she was calm. She was ready. In Ireland, she lived in a place called Loreto Abbey. There, she began to learn English. It was not easy. She made mistakes. but she worked hard every day. After a few months, she was given a new name, Sister Mary Teresa, named after Sainte Thérèse of Lisieux, the little flower, a saint who did small things with great love. This idea would shape her whole life. From Ireland, she was sent to India, a country she had only read about. She didn't know anyone there. She had never seen such a big country with such a different culture, food, language, and people. But she was not afraid. When she stepped off the boat in Calcutta, now called Kolkata, she was only 19 years old. The sun was hot, the streets were busy, and the noise was everywhere. She saw children begging, old people sleeping on the streets, and sick people with no one to help them. This was the beginning of a journey that would change the world. But at that time, no one knew her name. She was just Sister Teresa, a young teacher at St. Mary's High School, living a quiet life behind the school walls. She taught girls from rich Indian families. She loved teaching. She was gentle and kind. Her students loved her. But something started to bother her. Every time she walked outside the school, she saw people in deep pain, hungry, sick, dying in the streets. She wondered, why am I teaching the rich when the poor are dying outside? That question stayed in her heart for years. Agnes, now Sister Teresa, felt a new kind of calling deep inside. But she didn't know yet what it meant. She didn't know that her biggest challenge and her greatest mission was still ahead of her. This was just the beginning of her untold journey. Chapter 2. Becoming Sister Teresa. When Agnes became Sister Mary Teresa, her life took a new shape. She had said goodbye to her family forever, and now she was in India, a country that looked, sounded, and felt completely different from the place where she was born. The year was 1929, and Sister Teresa was just 19 years old. She had traveled far across the world to serve God, and now her journey was really beginning. She arrived in a city called Calcutta, one of the busiest and poorest cities in India at that time. The streets were full of people. There were cars, buses, rickshaws, cows, dogs, and beggars, all moving in different directions. The noise, the smell, the colors, the chaos. It was overwhelming for someone so young and new to the country. But Sister Teresa didn't turn away. She had a calm face, a quiet strength, and a soft smile. She was ready to begin her mission. Her first assignment was to teach at St. Mary's High School, a private school for girls. The school was run by the Sisters of Loreto, the religious group she had joined in Ireland. The students at St. Mary's came mostly from middle-class and wealthy families. Many of them spoke English. They wore clean uniforms and carried books. They were lucky, very lucky, compared to the poor children outside the school gates. Sister Teresa was a natural teacher. She taught geography, history, and basic English. But more than the subjects, she taught kindness, discipline, and honesty. She was patient with slow learners. She gave attention to quiet girls who were often ignored. Many students later said they felt seen by her for the first time in their lives. They loved her soft voice, her gentle eyes, and her deep care. Even though she was very young, the other nuns and teachers respected her. But even as she enjoyed teaching, something started to trouble her. Every day on her way to school, she saw people living on the streets, children with no clothes, old women sleeping on the ground, and men too weak to stand. Many had no food. Some were dying slowly, right there on the sidewalk. This was not just once or twice. She saw it every single day. And every time she passed them, her heart became heavier. Inside the school, everything was clean, peaceful, and safe. But outside, it was pain, hunger, and death. She began to ask herself, am I doing enough? God sent me here to serve, but am I truly serving the ones who need it most? This question began to grow louder in her heart. She continued teaching, and she continued praying. Every morning, before classes, she would go to the chapel and sit silently. She asked for guidance. She asked God to show her the way. In 1931, just 2 years after she arrived, she took her first religious vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. These vows meant that she gave up all personal belongings, would never marry, and would obey the rules of the Loreto order. At this time, she also chose the name Teresa officially, in honor of Sainte Thérèse of Lisieux, who was known for doing little things with great love. For almost 17 years, she lived the same routine: teaching, praying, helping the school grow, and mentoring young girls. She became the principal of the school, and people began calling her Mother Teresa out of respect. But that question never left her. Am I doing what I was sent to do? Even though she was living a good life, she still felt something was missing. She was not unhappy, but she was not fully at peace either. She looked out the window of her school and saw a city full of suffering. She felt that her place was not inside the school anymore, but outside, in the streets, among the poor. This feeling was not just a thought, it became a strong fire in her heart. And then, something powerful happened. In 1946, everything changed. She boarded a train to Darjeeling, a hill station in India, for her yearly retreat. She sat by the window, looking at the Indian countryside, green fields, rivers, and small villages passing by. But her mind was not calm. She was praying silently, asking, searching. And then, on that train ride, she felt something deep and clear, what she later called the call within the call. She believed that God was speaking to her heart. She said it was like a voice, not from the outside, but from within. It told her to leave the convent, leave the safe school, and live among the poorest of the poor. She was called to help the ones who had no one, no family, no money, no home, and no love. She didn't see this as a dream or a random thought. For her, it was a divine order, a clear mission, one she could not ignore. But there was a problem. She was still a nun under the rule of the Sisters of Loreto. She could not just walk out. She needed official permission from the church. And this was not an easy thing to ask. What she wanted was radical. No nun had done anything like this before. But she was ready to try. She returned from her retreat with a new fire in her eyes. She knew what she had to do. The journey ahead would not be easy. She would face doubt, rejection, and deep poverty. But she was not afraid. Mother Teresa was about to leave the safety of the school walls and step into the dangerous streets of Calcutta. Not for herself, but for the people who had nothing. Her true mission was about to begin. Chapter 3. The Call Within a Call. In 1946, something happened that changed Mother Teresa's life forever. It didn't happen in a church. It didn't happen in a dream. It happened on a train. It was a simple train ride from Calcutta to Darjeeling, a hill town in India. She was going on her annual retreat, a time for silence, rest, and prayer. But that journey turned into the most important moment of her life. As the train moved slowly through the countryside, she sat by the window, deep in thought. She had been struggling with a question for many years. Am I really doing what God wants me to do? She loved teaching. She loved her students. But outside the school walls, she saw a city full of pain, hunger, and hopelessness. And then, right there, on that train, she heard it. Not with her ears, but in her heart. A quiet but powerful message. She described it as a call within a call. In her own words, she said, I heard the call to give up all and follow Christ into the slums, to serve him in the poorest of the poor. This was no ordinary thought. It was strong. It was clear. It was urgent. She knew, without any doubt, that this was her mission. She was being called to leave the safe life of the convent and go live among the poorest people on the streets, to touch their wounds, to feed them, to care for them, to love them. But this was not a small decision. It was huge. It meant leaving the order she had belonged to for 17 years. It meant giving up the comfort of a school, a clean bed, regular meals, and medical care. It meant stepping into a life with no salary, no home, and no support. And she couldn't just walk out. She needed permission from the Catholic Church, especially from the Archbishop of Calcutta and the Vatican in Rome. She had to explain her vision clearly, that she was not leaving God. She was going even deeper into his service, but in a new way. For almost 2 years, she waited. She wrote letters. She prayed. She kept working at the school. Every day she looked out at the poor in the streets and wondered, when will I be allowed to go? It was not easy. She felt torn between the life she knew and the life she felt called to live. But she never gave up. She was calm. She was patient. And she was sure this was what she was meant to do. Finally, in August 1948, her request was approved. Mother Teresa was granted permission to leave the convent and live as an independent nun outside the Loreto order. She was now free to follow her calling, but she would do it completely alone. And so she left behind everything she had known for almost 2 decades. That same month, she walked out of the gates of the Loreto convent in Calcutta, wearing a simple white cotton sari with a blue border, the outfit that would later become famous all over the world. She had only 5 rupees in her pocket, just a few coins. She had no building, no team, no plan, and no income. All she had was her faith, her mission, and her love for the poor. Her first stop was Patna, a city in India where she spent a short time training with the medical mission sisters. She learned basic medicine, how to clean wounds, how to give injections, and how to care for people with serious illnesses. She wanted to be prepared, not to preach, but to help. When she returned to Calcutta, she rented a tiny room in the slums. It had no bed, no fan, and no kitchen. But it was enough. She walked through the narrow streets, looking for people who needed help. She saw children eating from garbage bins. She saw old women lying on the sidewalk, shaking from fever. She saw men so weak they could not lift their heads. And she began, one person at a time. She washed the wounds of the sick. She gave food to the hungry. She taught poor children how to write using sticks on the dirt. She held the hands of the dying, so they would not be alone in their final moments. People watched her in silence. Some thought she was crazy, others thought she was a saint. But one thing was clear. She was not doing this for money, for fame, or for praise. She was doing it out of pure love. At first, she was completely alone. But slowly, others came. A few of her former students joined her, then other young women. They wore the same white sari with blue borders, and together they served the poorest of the poor. This was the beginning of what would become the Missionaries of Charity, a group that would grow into thousands of sisters, working in over 130 countries. But in those early days, it was just Mother Teresa, and the people no one else wanted to touch. She was no longer a school teacher. She was now a mother to the dying, a teacher to the forgotten, and a servant to the poor. And even though the world still didn't know her name, something powerful had begun. A movement based not on power or wealth, but on something much deeper: compassion. This was the true start of her untold journey. Chapter 4: Streets of Suffering, Heart of Service. The streets of Calcutta in 1948 were not just crowded, they were heartbreaking. The city was recovering from war, political division, and extreme poverty. Many people lived on sidewalks. Some died on them. The smell of garbage, illness, and death was everywhere. Most people walked past the poor without looking. But one woman stopped, again and again, every day. Her name was Mother Teresa. She had no big organization. She had no money. But she had a mission: to care for the people who had no one else in the world. She began with the simplest acts of love. She picked up the sick from the ground and cleaned their wounds. She gave medicine to those with fevers. She fed the hungry with small portions of rice. Sometimes she had to beg for food or supplies just to help others eat. She was not ashamed. She said, "I'm just a little pencil in the hand of God." One of the first people she helped was a man lying in the street, covered with sores, left to die. Flies were sitting on his body. He was shaking from pain. No hospital would take him. No one wanted to touch him. But Mother Teresa did. She picked him up and brought him to a small shelter. She cleaned his wounds, gave him warm food, and stayed by his side. He looked at her and whispered, "I have lived like an animal, but now I die like a human." This one moment, this one man, was the beginning of something powerful. She opened a small school in the slums. There was no blackboard, no chairs, no books. She drew letters on the ground with a stick and taught poor children how to read and write. These were children who had never seen a school before. They had no shoes. Many had no parents, but they had someone who believed in them. As the days passed, more children came. More people knocked on her door. Some needed food, some needed care, some just needed someone to listen. And slowly, people started to notice. A few of her former students came to help her. Then more young women joined her. They didn't come for money. They came for love. These women wore the same white sari with the blue border, simple, clean, and pure. It became their symbol. Together, they became the Missionaries of Charity. In 1950, Mother Teresa received official permission from the Vatican to start this new religious group. Their mission was clear and simple: to care for the hungry, the naked, the homeless, the crippled, the blind, the lepers, all those people who feel unwanted, unloved, uncared for throughout society. This small group of women began serving the city's forgotten people, those dying on the streets, people with leprosy, orphaned children, and the mentally ill. They would go to places no one else wanted to go. They did not preach religion. They simply gave love and care. But it was not always easy. Many people were suspicious of her. Some thought she had political motives. Others believed she was doing this for attention. She was even criticized by doctors and city officials who said her shelters were too simple and her medical care was not advanced. Mother Teresa listened, but she never stopped. She believed in doing small things with great love, not perfect things with power. She said, "It is not how much we do, but how much love we put in the doing." In the middle of the city, she opened her most famous home, Nirmal Hriday, which means pure heart. This was a place for people to die with dignity. People who were thrown away by society could come there and be held, fed, and loved in their final days. Some lived longer, some died quickly, but all were treated like human beings. Even the most hardened hearts were moved by what she did. One day, a reporter asked her, "How can you keep doing this every day? Cleaning wounds, smelling death, touching sick people with no cure?" She looked at him and said simply, "Each one of them is Jesus in disguise." Her mission spread slowly, but powerfully. Volunteers from other parts of India came to learn. Some went back to their cities and started similar homes. Donations began to arrive, even though she never asked. Her message was spreading without advertisement, because it was real. The world started to notice. But for Mother Teresa, it was never about the fame. She continued to live in a small room with no fan, no television, and no bed, just a mat on the floor. She ate the same food as the poor. She walked barefoot. She worked long hours. She believed that true service came from sacrifice. By the end of the 1950s, her order had grown from just one woman to dozens of sisters. Each one had given up everything to serve. And yet, they were full of joy. Mother Teresa often said, "We may not be able to do great things, but we can do small things with great love." This simple message touched people around the world. She didn't start with money. She didn't start with power. She started with a heart full of love and the courage to walk into the darkest places with light. This was the middle of her journey, and the world was just beginning to listen. Chapter 5: Love, Fame, and Criticism. By the 1970s, the name Mother Teresa was no longer just known in India. It had spread across the whole world. Newspapers, magazines, and television stations were talking about a small woman in a white sari who was caring for people no one else wanted to touch. She had no money of her own, no political power, no fame in the beginning. And yet, her work was changing lives, not just in Calcutta, but in many other countries too. People were deeply moved by her story. Here was a woman, born in Europe, who had left everything to live in the slums of India. She didn't just help the poor from far away, she lived with them, ate with them, washed their wounds, and held their hands as they died. Soon, the Missionaries of Charity began opening homes in other cities, then other countries. She went to Africa, Latin America, the United States, Europe, and war zones to care for the sick and the forgotten. Where there was suffering, she would go. One of the most powerful moments of her life came in 1979 when she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. This is one of the most respected awards in the world. It is given to people who help bring peace and love to others. When she received the news, she didn't act proud. She simply said, "I am unworthy." She accepted the prize, not for herself, but for the poor, the unwanted, and the unloved people she served. When she went to Oslo, Norway, to accept the prize, she refused the traditional Nobel banquet. That dinner would have cost around $192,000. She asked them to give that money instead to the poor in India. In her speech, she spoke with deep emotion. She said, "If you want to bring peace to the world, go home and love your family." It was a simple message, but it touched the hearts of millions. After that, her face and voice were everywhere. She met world leaders like Pope John Paul II, President Ronald Reagan, Princess Diana, and many more. They called her a living saint. But not everyone agreed. As her fame grew, so did the voices of critics. Some people began to ask difficult questions. They said, "Why are her homes so simple? Why doesn't she use more advanced medical care?" Others asked, "Where does all the donation money go?" And some criticized her strong Catholic beliefs, especially her opposition to abortion, contraception, and divorce. One of the most well-known critics was a writer and journalist named Christopher Hitchens, who made a documentary called Hell's Angel. He accused her of glorifying suffering, saying that she saw pain as something holy. He said she was helping people die, but not always helping them live better. Some critics said her homes were too basic, without enough doctors or medicine. Others said she didn't focus enough on solving poverty in the long term, only caring for people after they were already suffering. These attacks were strong, they were public, they were loud. But how did Mother Teresa respond? She didn't argue, she didn't fight back, she simply kept working. When reporters asked her about criticism, she often smiled gently and said, "God has not called me to be successful. He has called me to be faithful." For her, success was not about big numbers or beautiful buildings. It was about love. It was about serving one person at a time. She continued visiting hospitals, orphanages, and disaster areas. She helped people with AIDS in New York when no one else would even touch them. She opened homes in Lebanon during the war, in Ethiopia during famine, and in Chernobyl after the nuclear disaster. Where there was danger, she went. Where there was death, she brought comfort. Where there was no hope, she brought peace. And still, she lived simply. Her own room had nothing but a small bed, a desk, and a crucifix. She never took money for herself. She never owned anything. Even when flying to another country, she would take the cheapest seat, travel with little luggage, and eat what the poor ate. She was not perfect. She made mistakes. She admitted them. She was human. But her focus never changed. Love, dignity, faith. Even when the cameras turned off, even when no one was watching. As she became older, her health began to weaken, but her mission grew stronger. The Missionaries of Charity had now spread to more than 100 countries, with thousands of sisters caring for the sick and the forgotten. In 1996, she was awarded the United States Congressional Gold Medal, one of the country's highest honors. Many other awards followed. But she didn't care about the medals. She often said, "Let us not be satisfied with just giving money. Money is not enough. People need your hands to serve them and your hearts to love them." Love was the true award she believed in. She didn't want the world to admire her. She wanted the world to see the poor, to touch them, and to love them. As her life reached its final years, she had become one of the most famous women in the world, and also one of the most criticized. But she remained humble and true to her path. In her heart, she was still that simple girl from Skopje who had once dreamed of becoming a missionary. The world had changed around her, but her mission, her heart, had stayed the same. Chapter 6: Legacy That Lives Forever. By the mid-1990s, Mother Teresa was no longer just a woman. She had become a symbol of compassion, service, and faith. She had spent over 50 years living among the poor, touching the sick, holding the dying, and bringing hope to people who had nothing. But her body was growing weak. She suffered from heart problems, lung infections, and fatigue. Several times she was rushed to the hospital. The doctors told her to rest, but she didn't stop. She said, "I'll rest when I'm dead. Until then, I have work to do." Even when she was too sick to walk, she was carried on a stretcher to visit the poor. Her heart was failing, but her spirit never gave up. In March 1997, she gave up her position as the head of the Missionaries of Charity. She knew the work would continue, but it was time for others to lead. On September 5, 1997, Mother Teresa died in Calcutta at the age of 87. The news spread across the world in seconds. People from all countries, all religions, and all backgrounds mourned her death. India held a state funeral, usually only given to presidents and prime ministers. Her body was carried through the streets, followed by thousands of people, rich and poor, Hindu and Muslim, Christian and atheist. The whole world stopped to honor her. But Mother Teresa did not leave behind buildings, businesses, or wealth. She left something greater, a living example of love in action. At the time of her death, the Missionaries of Charity had over 4,000 sisters and hundreds of homes in more than 120 countries. They continued her mission, serving the sick, the hungry, the dying, the forgotten, the orphaned, and the unloved. Her message was simple, but powerful. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. She believed that every life matters, that every person deserves dignity, and that even in the darkest places, a little light can shine bright. After her death, the world wanted to honor her. In 2003, just 6 years after her passing, Pope John Paul II declared her Blessed Teresa of Calcutta. This was the first big step toward sainthood in the Catholic Church. And on September 4, 2016, she was officially declared a saint by Pope Francis. The ceremony took place at the Vatican, and thousands of people from around the world gathered to witness the moment. She was now known as Saint Teresa of Calcutta. But even beyond the title of saint, her real power lives on in the hearts of people everywhere. Today, the Missionaries of Charity continue her work in the poorest parts of the world, in leper colonies, HIV clinics, orphanages, disaster zones, and war-torn villages. They still wear the same white sari with blue borders. They still live simply. They still serve the poorest of the poor. But it's not just her sisters who carry her legacy. It's every person who gives a little more, every child who shares their food, every adult who gives time, love, or comfort to someone in pain. You see, Mother Teresa's mission was never just about her. It was about you and me and all of us. She believed that the world changes when one person dares to love another, without expecting anything in return. She once said, "If you judge people, you have no time to love them." She also said, "The hunger for love is much more difficult to remove than the hunger for bread." And maybe that is her greatest message, that in a world full of noise, violence, division, and selfishness, the most radical thing we can do is love. Love the forgotten, love the broken, love the difficult, love the unlovable. And maybe, just maybe, we'll change the world. Not with grand speeches, not with big buildings, but with small acts of love one by one, just like she did.